I'd like to call this meeting to order, this being the School Capital Fund Commission, September 9th, 2019. And if you have not received, those of you in the audience, copies of the agenda, there's still some copies up here if you'd like to have a copy to look on to. Help yourself to those extra handouts. I need a motion to approve to follow the agenda as presented. Gene Bell moved to follow the agenda. Second from Joe Belcher. We will move on. Commissioners, you have in front of you the approval, or rather the minutes from the July 8th, 2019 and August 12th, 2019 meeting minutes. I trust you got these in the email as well and have had time to review them. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions necessary? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to accept as distributed.
I'll make that motion.
Charlotte Sullivan makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brownie Newman, and all in favor is aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is for public comment. And do we have anyone in the audience that is wishing to make public comment? Okay. Mr. Brown, go ahead.
My name is Dan Brown. I am here on behalf of Hall Creek Elementary School. I am a parent, I'm a member of the advisory council and on the PTA. And I'm here with quite a few other people from Hall Creek. I'm really happy that we have a good bunch that were able to come today. I'll keep this brief. First and foremost, I want to say thank you very much to the committee and so many people that volunteer their time. This is we appreciate everything you guys do and the position that you're in, trying to find where best to allocate a small amount of money for way more projects than you're able to. So we appreciate that, and certainly appreciate and are glad to not have to be in your seats. One of the reasons that we're here is because Hall Creek is, as everyone knows all too well, is going through some major projects, and I understand we're on the proposal for two separate items. I know priority one, we're very thankful to have to be up there with such a good priority, a high priority for the beginning of an addition to the new wing. We're really happy to have the new children and families from the intensive intervention II community, which is allowing us to have grow and have some new valuable people to our community. Later in the proposal is a second phase of the project, and the parents and community members in the Montford area are concerned that we have two projects, one that's going to happen quickly, and a second one that is really the same project, but that is going to be phased in at a later date and draw out the project, in the worst case scenario over multiple years, and put the school and the community through a longer than should be necessary process, which would potentially drive away families and increase the costs. So our hope is that the committee would be able to lump these together into one big project, in a perfect world. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and we welcome all of you who joined us from Hall Creek today. I had the privilege of going out visiting your school probably a couple months ago. Dan, you were there and showed us around, you and principal, and so we are certainly aware of the needs there, and we'll look at those with very serious attention. Thank you. Anyone else with public comment? Hearing none, we will move on down the agenda. And to let you all know really what's happening, we're going to be hearing three presentations today. One will be from our financial folks with the county, who will be giving us an update and a review of the financial situation of the school capital funds. And following that, Asheville City Schools will be on the agenda for 30 minutes, and Buncombe County Schools following that. One question that I do have, I was approached earlier about Asheville City Schools going first. What time is your meeting today? This afternoon? 5. So going ahead and staying with our agenda, 30-minute presentation for finance, you'll still be fine, right? Okay. So we will stay with the agenda as printed, and we won't modify that, but you will go before Buncombe County, okay? All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that said, we will now hear the capital funding review, if you will, of the capital projects. And I think, Matt, you're presenting that.
Yes, sir.
You have the podium, sir.
So looking at Article 39 sales tax, we just finished up the fiscal year, and I've kind of switched the way that we've looked at this in the past, where we've looked at it on a cash basis, to more mirror the way that we do our reporting here at Buncombe County. It would make more sense when we do the budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. So the Article 39 sales tax came in at $19.9 billion. It came in double that, but half of this is for the School Capital Fund Commission at $19.9 million, which was roughly 2.34% growth over last year. It is growth. It might not be the growth we want to see that we constantly need, but there was growth there. We had done a projection early on. This slide basically just states that we were pretty close to what we had projected. Looking at it on the modified accrual basis, which is the way that we've changed this presentation to, at 19.9 million. And we continue to monitor. So as we go into through FY20, I'll continue to monitor the projections and constantly provide these updates for you guys. Current debt service holdings, these haven't changed since we last talked at our last meeting. We'll make our next payment November, December for interest payment. But principal holdings are $162 million.
If you can, next time, bump the font up on
Sure, absolutely. Walking through the expenditures, the funding cycles, starting with school year 2017, those projects are nearing completion, all of them. These are all in your packets. If you need me to stop on anything, just throw something at me. 2018 projects are also nearing completion. There's a couple that haven't started yet, but pretty healthy there. 2019, looking pretty good. And then the 2020, of course, we talked about the radio upgrade equipment install. The other projects are underway. Nothing too crazy there. One thing I wanted to point out as we get to the cash flow. So this font is small, I apologize, but it's just to point out that the 2019 and 2020. So we're meeting today, we're talking about 2021. And when I say 2021, it means budget year 2021. So if we're in fiscal year 2020, we're moving into 2021. These will be the decisions that are made going into the future. It's good to point out that the 19 and 20 projects, we haven't issued any debt yet. And that was about $22 million. The fund's kind of just been absorbing that. The fund balance in the fund, the last time we issued debt was 2018. You'll see on the next slide what that looked like. But we've been able to cash flow that money, and the thought is we would issue this debt this year. So,
if the interest rates go down in a couple of weeks, will that help us?
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So the timing might be.
Yeah, we've actually benefited quite a bit by not issuing debt when we were planning on doing it.
So there's a lot to take in here. So what you're looking at is if you opened up our CAFR, that's our financial report, you would see, if you look in this fund, that we have a beginning available fund balance at the end of 2018 of $41,281,000. The historical 2019 column represents the revenues and expenditures that we brought in through the end of June. I've also thrown some things in there that we're going to accrue back, like sales tax. But you can see down at the bottom, estimated available fund balance, $12 million. So in the past, it's been presented to you all on the cash basis. When you flip it to the modified accrual, it's just timing and things like that. We're still pretty much exactly where we were before. So starting 2020, which is fiscal year 2020, where we are right now, we had a beginning balance of $12,115,000. The Article 39 sales tax, I mentioned earlier in a previous slide that it was around 2.4% growth. I've kept it conservative for our forecast. It's what I like to do for the county. It's what I want to do for you guys. Building in some conservatism kind of pads us going forward. But I've got the growth on the sales tax in there at 2%. We have some subsidies left over from some debt issuances. We have some investment earnings in there. The investment earnings are growing from 2020 on at 1.5, a little over 1.5%. And then this anticipated bond proceeds. So previously I had mentioned that we have unissued debt of $22 million. So in order for this to work in my brain, I had to add a couple lines here. I added a line that says anticipated bond proceeds and approved projects in progress. So what I hope to achieve with that is to show you as we go forward that whatever that anticipated bond proceed is, it's going to wash out whatever funding we decide we're going to do in future years. It's a little wacky right now because, like I said earlier, we haven't issued any debt in a couple of years. So that's what that 22,036,187 is there on that anticipated bond proceeds. Moving down the 2020 column, the approved projects in progress, $17 million. So that $17 million represents all of the current projects you guys have approved. If we were to spend all of that money next year, which we know that's probably not going to be the case, but I wanted to go ahead and account for it, take it out of the fund balance so we can move forward with it. So, clean slate after that. We're getting down at the bottom. I've got a line for new debt, which we haven't gotten to yet, and existing debt service. So the existing debt service was the debt we've issued prior years that's going on. By nature, it will trickle down. On your blown up cash flows, you'll see that it goes out even further. So $16,283,675. This is where we get to have fun with it, right? We get to say, okay, how much money do we have to spend for next year? Which is kind of a loaded question because the scenario says you can throw different numbers in there. It depends on where you want to land. You've used $12 million. I think that was what was last presented to you all. That $12 million basically keeps that available fund balance from going wild, right? So the $12 million keeps you kind of steady, maybe a little bit more. I would even go as far as to say there's some capacity there. So what happens if we go to $16 million this year? You see that you still have capacity, everything's good. What's going to get wacky though is when you start saying, okay, I want to fund $16 million this year, and we've plugged in $13 million, and if you look at the 2022 column, I've got $13 million in there, and we've got $14 million the next year. We've just got to be cognizant of the fact that whatever we do this year, we have to remember we have future years that we're going to have more and more requests coming in because they don't stop. So when I worked on the budget here for about 3 years, we would have these conversations with the commissioners. We would work on them in workshops. It's kind of a, you got to play with it. You got to see what you got to work with, plug the numbers in. One thing I will point out though, between $16 and $20 million, you're not looking too, you're still looking pretty healthy. But let's say we saw the list this year. There's a lot of requests as needed. Looking at 2025 and 2026, you're dipping into your fund balance. That's what we don't want. To save $50 million in 1 year, and that's, I'm looking at column 2021 where it says approved projects in progress. If we were to go $50 million this year, it would still almost be the same as if we did $25 million this year, $25 million next year. So just keep that in mind. You're going to start eating into your reserves if we don't keep it at kind of a attainable number. 12, 16, 17, feel pretty safe with that.
Or you have to significantly modify what you're gonna do in the out years. So
Yeah.
you decide to do 50 million in 2021, and we gotta figure out what we're gonna do in 22, 23.
Yeah, drop it out. Because this has $1 million, it has $1 million growth on there after 2020, 2022.
So all those scenarios you're showing, they all have the same amount of spending in future years, like 22, 23, 24. The only number you're changing is what happens
This year.
the coming year. Okay.
And so it's good to note, so what we're doing with this fund, I mentioned earlier the Article 39 came in at 19 million. With the growth that we've been seeing, that's what that Article 39 sales tax line is. We want to do debt issuances for anything in this fund because it allows us to have capacity for future years. So when we're looking at issuing $16 million in debt, you're probably looking at like $2.4 million the first year, and then it's going to kind of trickle down. And I am using still a conservative interest rate of 5%, which we know it'll probably be a little bit lower. But any questions on this? It's a lot to take in. Short of the long is we're looking pretty good. I wouldn't go hog wild with it this year, but $12 million might have been a little too low. $12 million keeps you super safe, but you have the ability to go up. I would even say to $17, $20 million. We just got to keep in mind what we're doing the next few years.
And this assumes the future sales tax growth rate at 2.5%?
2%.
2%.
And this year is at 2.4. It's kind of funky if you look at the presentation. The odd years are heavier than the, or the even years are heavier than the odd years in growth, but I wouldn't go too high on the sales tax. 2%'s growth, but we're starting to get a little,
And when are you planning on issuing the debt for the project we've already funded?
so that would be issued this year. Probably
First quarter.
Yeah,
First quarter of next year.
and then we would start paying that debt. We would issue it in 2020, get the proceeds, and it would start being paid in 2021. So then whatever we decide for this year, it's gonna be a year out from that. And then constantly a year out, a year out, and a year out.
So Matt, tell me again why we changed the, from 12 to 50.
I was just illustrating. Basically, the point of this is, we can wiggle a bit, but when I jump to 50, you're starting to get into the kind of scary territory with the future years. If we're keeping everything constant, it's always a massage, right? So how much are you funding this year? How much are you funding next year and next year? I was just illustrating the fact that what the impact does.
That's more than 3 times as much, so.
It's more than 3 times as much, but it's probably like a feather in the hat of what was requested this year. So,
that ain't-
but it's also just for illustrative purposes. You don't have to do $50 million.
All right.
Yeah.
Back.
But like I said earlier, it's the same as doing 25 million this year and doing 25 million next year. You're going to yield the same results. Just be careful. Any questions on the financial stuff?
Any questions from the commission? Everybody good? Well, I do have just a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm looking at the schedule for 2021, Article 39 sales tax, according to your numbers that I'm seeing, is $20,798,679.
Yes.
And under the amount that we might choose to award, if we're under that amount, we should still be adding money into an estimated available fund balance for future, correct?
Well,
If you're under that, and you're taking into account the debt service.
The debt services, so we'd have to add debt services in that
Yeah,
number?
because all that money we're bringing in essentially is paying for debt service. We're
Understood.
not cash funding projects.
yeah. So the thought is you guys will, you'll do $12 million or $15 million this year. What'll happen is we'll issue the debt and we'll pay the debt service off with Article 39. The bond
Over the
proceeds
years.
will come in and pay for the actual expenditures of the projects themselves.
Yeah, okay. So the debt service, you're just dragging that out over, what, 10, 15
20
years?
years.
20 years?
So it represents, I think most of these we do, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, 20-year issuances.
Yes,
Okay.
20-year issuance level principal.
So what's not going to change is your existing debt service line that you see there.
I see.
What's going to fluctuate is whatever you guys decide to keep funding for every year. It's going to impact that 20-year amortization schedule, and it keeps building on as we go for future years.
And if the national interest rate gets changed at the next meeting, which is sort of anticipated, right? Then at that point, we'll know, I guess my question is, at what point will we know what our interest rate for the next round of borrowing really will be? Because that'll probably,
we won't know
make a
until we
meaningful
go to
difference,
market.
right? Until we actually,
Yeah, until we actually go to market, we don't know what interest rate we'll get.
okay.
But it will be favorable. We're AAA rated, and interest rates are historically low again, so we will get a good rate. It won't be 5%. It'll be somewhere between 3 and 4 probably.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Matt, for the presentation.
You are.
All right. That moves us along on our agenda to our first presentation from the school, and that will be Asheville City Schools. And
Yes. I would like to say on behalf of Asheville City Schools that we are so grateful for the improvements that you have made to our campuses. Having been away for 2 years and coming back and seeing the difference is amazing, not only as a taxpayer, but as an educator. So thank you. The improvements that have been made at Asheville High School and Montford and Jones campuses are truly amazing. So we want to tell you how grateful we are. And today, in looking at the critical needs for 2020-21, we have Scott Donald and Chip Powell, who are going to present for us from PFA Architects.
thank you.
Thank you all for having us today. Scott Donald with PFA Architects. I got Chip Powell in the audience from our office as well. The school system, facilities, Tim over here. Montford County Facilities is here, that's been helping us for the last 3 years at Asheville High. But a lot of this, and Don and Tim are here, but a lot of these critical needs started back when we started Asheville High about 3 years ago. Some of the critical needs and the high priority needs that we're going to identify was as a result of that project, and looking at all the other 7 campuses in Asheville City. So I just wanted to go through this afternoon what are the actual goals and objectives of our projects. And of course, the number one goal is to extend and enhance the campus service life of each campus, which also would improve the learning environment for the students. Also minimize operational disturbance as we do these projects. As you remember, Asheville High was a very intensive project and had to happen during school hours, so it was a lot of coordination and logistics through that project to keep that project moving. And it was actually finished a year early, so we'd probably still be working there, but we came up with some creative ideas and to speed that project along. Also to maximize our budget efficiency, so that we have realistic, pragmatic solutions to these problems at each campus. We also wanted to provide realistic costs from the design through the construction. So all these numbers include design. Actually, they're including escalation too, because some of these are down the road a bit. But the priorities were identified by the school maintenance facility, and the biggest priority is replacing buildings that were lost, particularly over at Asheville High. We lost a 13,000 square foot building, and that was mainly due because of the shell restoration. Put a brand new roof on that building, and then when we started doing the restoration to the stone veneer and the tuck pointing of the building, found out that the actual superstructure was corroded so bad that that building had to come down. So we started identifying other shell improvements at other campuses, which is, we feel, a priority. Also the MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and fire protection. A lot of these have exceeded 20 years, particularly like boilers and chillers and cooling towers, the piping in the schools, things like that. We've got buildings that were built in the 90s that are starting to need new HVAC piping. And then as working with the county, Montford County, with Ronnie and Mike over there and the building inspectors, we identified that the way these priorities work is, of course, the shell in the exterior of the building, because that's what saves everything on the inside, but also the upgrade life safety, which is your egress and your stair towers, all the things that make the school safe. And then the next priority would be your accessibility to meet the handicap codes. So our process through this whole project, or these projects, identifying these critical and high priorities, has been with discussions with Don and Tim and going through all these campuses on different tours, and then identifying a scope or a realistic scope for the work and getting real prices from real contractors and real subcontractors. So all of these numbers have been looked at by contractors. And then based on our experience, we want to capitalize on the recent renovation experience at Asheville High. So what we've identified in 2021 is a replacement project over at the Asheville High School. It's approximately a 13,000 square foot building with classrooms and a weight room. It's attached to the varsity gym, so it's integral to that athletics program and other programs that the school has actually had to spread out through the campus now and take over spaces they've never intended to have as education type spaces. There's also, in 2022, we've got 2 stone retaining walls. There's actually a structural wall over at Claxton, so we've lumped 2022 into, it's actually 3 projects, or 3 different areas: Claxton, Montford, And then Claxton has a wall along Merriman and Hillside that needs to be looked at. So we lumped that into the next priority. And then while we were at Asheville High, we took a lot of alternates on that project. It ended up being a $25 million project, all in design and everything, soft costs, but we probably could have spent another $8 million on that campus. So we've gone back and pulled out actual numbers on some of the alternates that we didn't take, which the biggest problem out there now is the water and sewer in the main building. So these are real numbers with that include finishes and things like that as you go through the building, starting at the third floor, all the way down to the out to the street, water and sewer. And then critical needs across 4 other campuses, which is Hall Fletcher. We're actually starting the work there now. We've got a new roof and renovating 5 bathrooms. So that work's out for bid, and I think we've got the bid date September 19th. And then Vance, all of the HVAC, we actually have a small project there with City Schools doing the skylights in Fishhood. And then Asheville Primary, abatement and repairs, and then central office envelope remediation.
Scott, before you move further, I just want a little clarification, please, sir. The spreadsheet that was mailed in to the finance department, the numbers don't exactly jive, but I think but you're reporting, rather than based on individual products, you're reporting on the total projects for like 21, 22, 22, 23,
Correct.
et cetera. So for this funding cycle, really the number we're talking about is the 2021 up there.
That's right, correct.
Just that for this
And that
cycle.
one does not have escalation in the number because it's a now number rather than the others
Okay.
down the road have escalation.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I'm sorry, just to follow up on that, the 2021 Asheville High new classroom replacement building, that 5.5 million, is that a funded project or a to be funded project?
To be funded.
Okay, and that's the number 1 request.
That's correct.
That's the most near term.
Because that happened probably last summer, 2 summers ago.
Yeah, we did, the building was structurally condemned as a result of part of the restoration, the further we got into it. So the immediate top 2 line items on the request are for the design and engineering,
Yeah.
for the replacement of that building and then construction
Yeah.
of that building.
Right, so we talked about it at the last meeting, but
We
we didn't
did.
fund it at that meeting, so it's still there.
There was some funding that went to the demolition,
Right, but
basically
not to
making
be,
the space safe.
And PFA has been paid, just so you know, through schematics on that project.
One other question, on the spreadsheet we're looking at, there's a third item, multiple ACS schools, 1,992,000. The date of 10/1/2020, so that's for next year, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all
That
right,
would be the Montford and Claxton project.
all right, we're with you. We're with you.
okay, but just, could you get back to the previous slide? Okay, but this slide does represent the next 4 years of kind of prioritized funding requests from the city district. This is like, if we look at this slide, we kind of have a comprehensive sense of what the ask is.
What's coming down the pipe, yeah.
Yep, okay.
But frankly, and also there's been an escalation number of approximately 5% per year compounded over these numbers as we look ahead. We wanted to give you a picture, not only what's the immediate ask, but also what also needs to be done now, but thinking realistically about how it needs to stagger through the years.
And these numbers here are just critical. I mean, there's a high priority list, and the next slide it's color coded. Red is critical and blue is high priority. So what happens is if you keep kicking the high priorities down the road a while, they become critical at some point.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say to Brownie's point is that, you know, the high priority, I mean, you got a total of, doing my best to see it, $47 million on there, so, you know, high priority becomes, can become critical. So that's not, so those are definitely not in stone, that's just your best estimate.
Yes, you can see here, the next slide, the critical needs are identified in red, but then we had to go back and prioritize the years at which they get done. So that's that next, the previous slide is the next 4 years, or through 2024. But if you look at the total of all of it, it's about 42 million. So starting over at Asheville High School, you can see here the building that was removed. The center picture, top center, they had several classes in there. They had the ROTC, the weight room, several classrooms and offices. Athletic coaches' offices were in that building. And so what they've had to do is they've moved into the old gym, the old rock gym. They've taken up half the floor of that gymnasium, and we're not sure, structural loading on that building, if it was intended for that purpose. They're having to protect those wood floors. They're also moving into the media center that used to be it used to be a big computer lab that's now divided up into 3 classrooms, and it's basically temporary substandard construction that the Buncombe County building inspector has sort of let us do this as a temporary basis. So these are some of the spaces that they're having to go into. These locker rooms were supposed to get renovated but it was an alternate, so it did not get in the project we had with the big project at Asheville High School. You can see now it's basically just a grass lot where the building used to be in the bottom center picture. This is the actual cost estimate for the new building. It's currently 12,670 square feet. It's basically the same footprint of what came down. And this is an artistic rendering of what we see it to look like in the future. So the floor plans, you see we have 7 pretty much generic classrooms because the building has not been programmed. 4 offices, or 2 admin offices and several athletic offices. The weight room opening right out onto the athletics field. A new bank of restrooms and an elevator. And it is attached to the existing varsity gym. So as we move on to Claxton and North Star, which is Montford, you can see we've got the retaining walls that wrap around Merriman Avenue and Hillside, and you can see in the last picture on the right there, I think that's the Montford Wall. It's hard to see on this photograph. And there's also a bowed wall in Claxton. Okay, and then we move on to 2023, 2022, 23. This is the water and sewer replacement project, which includes all the interior finishes that's associated with those. And it's basically from the top floor of the main building all the way out to the street. And these are the other balance of the critical needs, the other 4 campuses. So you got Hall Fletcher, HVAC replacement, and we are working on now the 4 restroom facilities, similar project to what we did at Montford when we added the elevator onto that building and renovated the restrooms and added 4 science labs. This is actually the start of renovating Hall Fletcher. Now we've also identified the HVAC system as poor and failing. Vance is HVAC repairs and abatement, and roof drainage remediation. We've actually got new skylights going on that building now. It's out for bid. And then Asheville Primary Utilities, hot water system, sewer, electric water infrastructure and abatement. And then central office is mainly the wall along the parking lot in the front of the building. We've got waterproofing repairs there and roof drainage and tuck pointing of the building on that, to keep the water out of the lower level. And then, that's all we got, so if you guys have any questions.
Got one question on the new building at the Asheville High campus. So it's, I'm sorry, what was the price tag on that? 13 million? I'm sorry, 5.5 million?
That's right.
So, and it's about a 13,000 square foot building.
Correct.
So that's about $400 a square foot. That's, I mean, that just seems really high, but
It's got hot costs.
is that, talk about that number.
Furniture, I mean, I've got a full estimate on it that we did, last summer. FF&E, so it's basically a turnkey with everything, design cost, geotech. So it's not just construction, there's a lot more to it.
And is that pretty typical for, any kind of new construction like that?
We're pricing some now and probably around 3 something, but just for construction, new schools, especially a smaller project like this inside of an existing campus. So, logistics of getting to the project. But, I mean, it's something that we would consider, we could bid it at that point in time just to see what the real numbers are. But this was actual bid costs, as part of the, we were looking at doing it as a change order as to the Asheville High project. So it was actually bid out through the company that had the project. But instead, we stopped at demolition and repair the site without replacing the building. So we're using real numbers, and is there escalation in this one?
There's a little bit.
Right.
There was some contingency built in, architecture, engineering fees, other fees associated with soft costs as well as construction. So it's a turnkey price. The design and engineering fee's been broken out of that into this document, but the sum total comes back to that.
So my mind goes back, Brownie, to when we did Asheville Middle School, we did the Isaac Dixon. And middle school came in, our first estimate, which would be this, 50 million, I think, over 50 million. Did anybody, do you remember that? It was over 50 million. I think we ended up at 42.
It was close to that.
Yeah, I think,
George 46.
It was close to that, Mr. Belcher, and then we value engineered,
Yeah.
just kept value engineering it down and taking some of the FF&E out till we got it to a workable, number.
yeah, I mean, I think it turned out great.
It did, it's a great school.
And so my point is that, I mean, the easy thing would have been to go, and say, oh yeah, that's great, let's do the math and let's figure it out and let's make it happen and never question any of that. And so I kind of feel like that I'm in a little bit of the same position with this when you're talking about escalation costs, talking about all these other things that are added in on top, which probably need to be. With so many needs, you got, Hall Fletcher standing up and passionately, wanting us to do all of it, which is what I would do if I were you. I'd ask for every bit of it. But are those the numbers that is 5.5 what we should fund for this to meet the critical need? Is 6 point, whatever the number we need to do for, Hall Fletcher to do what?
Correct. I mean, it took a while to go from 50 to 42 or 4 or whatever it was.
And
But it was real effective.
These prices with Vanoy, McGregor was with Montgomery County.
Yeah.
So those finishes aren't elaborate in any way, as far as what the building would be constructed of, but it would certainly, we could probably engineer some of that cost down somewhat. Scott, stop me. I don't want to wait.
Well, some of it also had to do with upgrades to the terrace, because once we add on to this building, which is the varsity gym, the new building would have to be sprinklered, and then does that kick in the need to sprinkler the actual varsity gym? Because I don't know if you can partially sprinkler.
We,
Without having-
we have separate buildings, but there's also some waterproofing and roof work effectively that needs to be done at the varsity gym that will be done at that same time as well, because there are a couple of issues at an elevated terrace there that's over the existing locker rooms at the varsity gym.
So where my mind's going, and I'll hush, is that, you know, we need to be able to prioritize the projects. Say, okay, you know, I'm just gonna give you, you know, y'all my opinion. And prioritize the projects. Okay, this needs to be done, or this has to be done. And then we back into the math. Rather than saying, okay, yeah, we all lock arms on this one, and 5.5 is okay. 5.5 shouldn't be okay, if we want to do more. And it may be the final number, I don't know. But what was done with Isaac Dixon and Asheville Middle it worked really good, particularly Asheville Middle, because it was just a number that everybody just was like, oh my gosh. You know, we'd never heard that number before, but it turned out great, so. But anyway, that's where my thought is on these, you know, projects and the amount of money.
Couple of questions to follow up on Mr. Newman's estimate of about $400 per square foot. Now, I heard what you just said, that, well, that's probably going to include some waterproofing on the old gym and things like that. Would you say that it's an unfair estimate that it will be $400 a square foot? That you may be spending part of this money on something else?
Absolutely.
And how much is that going to be?
We have an allowance
I know it's 400,000 for the repairs for the varsity gym.
for just the waterproofing.
And how much, did I also understand, Scott, that you said this would include furnishing this new building, classroom, furniture, and so
I
forth?
believe it would, because everything that was in that old building was pretty much tossed out.
So
Except
this
for-
would include new
That's
furnishings?
right.
Would it include new weight equipment for the
I
gym?
think they would just move that back.
Just move that over?
Right.
So we did not factor in all new weight equipment for that
Okay.
gym. And there's $80,000 allowance for, sorry, that's the wrong line. We had a close to $100,000 or $200,000 allowance for the waterproofing in that estimate as well for the varsity gym, to remove the pedestal paper system, re-waterproof, and put that back down. And then construction of the new building. And then, like I said, there's also soft costs associated with that, fees. We have a CMAR delivery price construction structure.
That's right.
So that comes with a certain amount of fee that's involved in pre-construction services too. So
I mean, you
it's
could
not-
do design, bid, build, and probably, you know, a project this small probably wouldn't require a CMAR to be involved.
So on the walls at Claxton and Montford, number one, who's monitoring that? And number two, at what point do we tear it down? At what point do we rope it off? Or how can we ensure that
Well, Montford,
excessive,
Right.
one in Montford on the back, it looks good.
Montford's in pretty bad shape. We tried to get,
To answer your question on Montford, it's being monitored by eye. I mean,
Okay.
so as I go by there often, I make sure that the cantilever isn't getting worse, those kind of things. That was another project that Greg Israel and I tried to work out in that Montford, package that we did a year ago. So Montford, keeping a pretty close eye on it. Claxton hasn't moved as much. There's not as much structural, integrity lost out of that wall as there is at Montford. So that's basically how we're doing it, is just watching them to see how much they are moving.
And the Montford one is at the North Star
Yes.
School, right? Did we I know we talked about it last year. I thought did we not appropriate funding for that?
We tried to,
No, we didn't.
and
No,
there was.
we did not. I mean, I remember we had a conversation about it, but
We did.
we did not actually vote for funding for it. I feel like now I'm kind of thinking about it, we may have had some like real preliminary cost estimates, but it wasn't really known that well yet, so maybe we were still waiting for some more detailed numbers. I think, I remember it was a surprisingly big number for,
Yes.
you know, for the wall, so, are are those cost estimates are they more,
Solid,
more solid now? Yeah.
I think so. We worked with Van Noy to get that cost, and, so I think that's a pretty solid number on that wall. And one thing about both those walls, especially Montford, if that wall does go, we lose the parking lot. And we just repaved, redone everything with that new lot out front. Over on Claxton's, if that one continues to go, then where the big, spruce trees are, right in there, probably where it's the worst. But, there's no question North Star's the worst.
My concern, because we don't see it or it doesn't appear at all in imminent danger, both of those situations could be catastrophic. And we
They
really
could be,
need to
absolutely.
have some quarterly, semi-annual report on it so that we don't lose sight of what we have to do.
And I know, and I don't have it running fresh in my memory, but we did get structural engineers to look at Montford, North Star. So I think we were, and maybe what you remember, Mr. Newman, is we looked at different types of repairs.
Right.
That,
Different
you know,
material?
Different materials, we looked at soil nailing, we looked at those kind of things. So I think when we finally settled on a number, that's a real number, and that was a fix.
And it included structural engineering and
Yes.
civil
It
engineering.
included all the structural engineering.
Storm drainage.
Storm drain, all of the above.
How long's the wall been there?
Mr. Bowden, I'm gonna say the wall's been there,
1920s maybe?
yeah,
Oh,
1920s,
yeah.
1930s.
How long is the wall? The wall at Claxton and the wall at
It's-
Montford?
600 feet long, probably. The one at Montford is the full length of the campus.
It's the full width of that front parking lot, so yeah, I would
And then
say,
it keeps going down past the athletic.
How high is it, Scott?
At some points, it's probably 12 feet high, but
okay, at the lowest, it probably max at its highest point is 12, 13 feet.
Are you planning to replace it with the architectural block, landscape
Well,
blocking, or
that's
it's
what
larger?
we're looking at, and, you know, Montford, and we did get into some of this with them, but Montford is a historic district. So I think at the time, we were looking at doing a solid concrete wall and maybe stamping it, like you see out here at the tunnel and those kind of things. So I do know we looked at several different fixes on that wall.
Well, let me ask this. I look at that, and you've got three major projects lumped together for $2 million. And I wonder if it would be prudent. Am I hearing that Montford is the worst wall?
Montford right now is the worst.
Could this be broken down? Could you provide back to this commission between now and our next meeting? Break that out as to what it would cost for the Montford wall, the Claxton wall, and then this roof replacement that's tied in there. You got three major things going here. Is that right here?
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay.
705.
yeah, we have it in
Not on this slide, but a different one.
Okay, okay. So that is, and those numbers then are solid numbers.
Correct.
That we're seeing here. Okay.
And the problem with the wall at Montford, and we've already been told that HRC would be involved with it. So we have to do it's in the historic district, so it would probably be a stone veneer on a concrete wall, which is probably one of the most expensive retaining walls you can do.
Is it a stone wall now, like with
It is.
stone embedded in concrete?
It's,
Yeah.
it's true stone,
And
right?
it's probably got real dead man stone holding it into the side of the hill, so it's the real deal.
Is that actually in the HRC requirements?
Well, it would probably just want the look of it.
You have to duplicate
Right.
whatever, or at least become, it's gotta
And
be
some
similar. Whatever the replacement is, has to be similar.
Right.
So
Somewhere
walls
along
that-
in there's when the stamped concrete was talked about,
Right.
you know, with the stone look. But this is holding a tremendous amount of static pressure behind it. I mean, it's holding an entire
Spike hill.
parking lot.
And the
So
buses drive right beside
Yeah.
it too, so that's not helping.
So how confident are you on that project? It being drilled down to the lowest cost? I mean, the
On
wall,
that-
what you're doing sounds great to me. The concrete wall stamp, surely that's gotta be strong enough to be able do the job. I mean, I would assume y'all put out multiple bids on that to get to this number, the 705, the 705.
I think Greg and I worked directly with Vanoy and PFA and a structural engineer to come up with this hard number.
So you actually already have plans drawn?
We know.
No, not that, you're not that far.
Design.
You've not bid it or anything
No,
yet.
no, this
So
was a
this
hard
is just an
number
educated
from-
guess that you have from
Yes.
your efforts there.
So a structural engineer would take it on next.
I mean, for me, I would like to see the Claxton retaining wall and the Claxton north wall's a non-issue, that's $5,000. I mean, the Montford retaining wall, I'd like to see, I'd like to see real numbers on those. Those are, I mean, to me, I would, you know, if I had real hard numbers on those, I would move them forward.
Well, I don't see any problem with doing that.
You know more
Well,
about that than I do over there, Brown.
I mean, it sounds like it needs to be done, but I guess just in terms of the timing of it, to Gene's point, you know, if if it all fell apart, it could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
But do we have confidence that this is something that needs to be done, but that there's not a risk of like a real failure where this is just gonna collapse over into the street?
Not sure.
Okay, well, that's,
Right.
I mean, if that's
That's
the case, then I mean, I think that there's a good argument for moving it up, but,
You know, just like.
it's not scheduled as a project for this year, but, if that's,
I don't know.
But my
Like
concern
this
is,
winter, if you got a lot of water,
Yeah.
for example, and it freezes, thaws, if you just keep pushing that wall out.
the seasonal variances is what dictates the erosion of the wall.
For here, yeah.
And we've had significant variances the last 5 years.
Yes, sir.
So we ought to at least look at it. I agree with Joe. It could just be more than we need to absorb, especially since we're here talking about it. That even makes it
Yeah,
more
and
sensitive.
I mean, you know, I'm going on y'all's information that the wall is train wreck. And so if it is, then, you know, my opinion would be we need to have the best absolute number, and then we need to take a look at it pretty quickly if it's dangerous.
yeah, and I'm open to, you know, to moving it up too. I just, you know, obviously it needs to be done right, it needs to be safe. I don't, you know, I mean, I live right down the street from here. I don't personally feel like this is a place where, you know, the aesthetics of what that wall looks like is really, I mean, there's a lot of other places that are like the entrances to the schools and things like that, where you really want it to look, you know, really good. Where this wall is not really, I think, an aesthetically, you know, kind of like priority area. It is an HRC, so if you're gonna have to go through that process, is what it is. But I don't know, I mean, I guess just one question is like, just if it weren't in the historic district, we have a sense for how much that is potentially
It would
driving
probably
the
be-
cost difference. It's $700,000 for
I think
just
a
one
third.
retaining wall. It's
That's why
a tough pill to swallow.
200 grand.
It'd be a lot, it'd be half the cost.
They have
It would be
to-
half the cost.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it'd be half.
I mean, you could go with a segmental block retaining wall. Of course, you have to excavate back far enough to be able to put in the geogrid behind it. So that would require parking lot work.
That's what I'm thinking is for the time you.
Or if you just did a concrete wall without the stone veneer.
Well, but you feel like this is the lowest number, realistically, with what you're gonna have, there's not some lower cost solution that might have a chance of getting through the
If we could
HRC
get,
process?
if, it would be a meeting with HRC.
Well, I would just encourage you to explore it, you know, just come up with some plan that looks good, but, you know, if there's a way to save hundreds of thousands of dollars on a retaining wall, I would want us to do that.
Because I agree with you, it's on that back street, you know, it's never,
It's not on Montford Avenue, it's over on the back of
I
this
think
very
there's only one house.
street that nobody, you know, probably has 20 cars a day go down. It's-
Right.
I think one of the things that's gonna be the challenge as far as cost escalation is keeping the parking lot the way it is without tearing that wall down, building something against that wall to hold it. Because if we start demolishing that wall, we lose that parking lot.
You'd have to
So
do it
that would increase your cost.
steps, basically.
So we'll get a hard number price and get back.
Could, in regards to that, taking another look at your numbers for both projects, the plan is that this board will meet again in a month. And we're not making decisions today. We will have time for you to look at those numbers, to value engineer, and to get this down to more realistic numbers. So, you know, I know sometimes you think this is it, but maybe there's some things to be done. And if you can get that more solid, and then when we bring it back, we may allow each school system, if you got something you want to add before we actually act. And I think that might.
And we can show you the breakdown too of how we got to these numbers.
Yeah, we probably ought to move on, Chairman. We got.
Yes, I agree. All right. So, thank you, Scott, for your presentation, and Buncombe County's next up, and,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I know we're on a pretty,
Welcome, Dr. Ball. It's all yours.
I want to thank you for allowing us to present our capital needs priorities, and we're gonna tag team this today. I want to first recognize our team. First off, Mr. Joe Huff, our Assistant Superintendent for Auxiliary Services, Mr. Clark White, who is our Director of Maintenance, and Alicia Reardon, who is our Energy Efficiency Manager. And I've got a couple of other directors, Deborah Frisbee, Director of Finance, and Barry Pace, the Director of Technology, is there. And I certainly can't forget our board chair, Ms. Ann Franklin. We appreciate you being here. I also want to thank Hall Creek Elementary parents for being here. I see Cindy McMahon, who is a board member of Reynolds, our Reynolds district. Appreciate you being here. Jay Dale, our principal at Hall Creek, and certainly can tell you that our highest priority is clearly going to be this Hall Creek Elementary project for our phase one. Hall Creek is one of those schools that was built upon the 1960s open school concept, no walls, wide open. It's a safety issue, liability issue. We're going to talk about that. But it also has an impact to address the K-3 class size adjustments that are now required by the legislation. So this has some direct impact with Fairview Elementary, one of our largest elementary schools.
So I just happened to notice Mr. Dale there. He was tucked in behind the post here, and I didn't see him. He is very high in my book from being at Pisgah Elementary, and my grandson loved him to death. So y'all did a good job in getting him over to Hall Creek. So
Thank you.
may even help you funding. I'm not sure, but
He's high on our list too, so we appreciate him being here. I want to begin by just giving a very quick, very general overview of the capital properties that we are responsible for in Buncombe County. As we talk about the various projects, if you look at that blue, the blue on the map, we've divided that into districts so you can reference the particular project with the particular district. The red inside in the very center it represents the Asheville City School System. And I do want to also mention, before I forget this, at the end of our presentation, I do want to address an issue that has come up regarding projects that are coming to a completion that were funded with Capital Commission funds. This is relevant to liquidating damages and timelines, and when we talk about all these projects, it is absolutely crucial to talk about the timeline from start to finish and what that contract shows. So it has certainly got relevance for both school systems. So if you'll allow me at the end of our presentation to reference that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. White.
All right. Within this blue area, you see, I don't know how to operate this thing. You got to tell me. On the right. I'm sorry. Right here.
Just roll it.
Oh, roll it. Okay. Sorry. And excuse me for having a cold too.
Roll.
My kids donated that to me this weekend. I appreciate that.
Wrong direction.
All right, wrong direction. Awesome. So, in our county, we wanted to show just a couple things, couple slides here that show basically how big we are and how much we have to keep track of. Inside our buildings, this is a list. I'm not going to go through everything for you. It's just a math project. We have chillers, boilers, asphalt, fire alarm systems. So you can do the math right there, and it shows you how much we have to spend on an annual basis just to maintain what we currently have. If you look at this, the next slide, which is a 5-year reoccurring cost, it basically totalizes all of the different structures within our facilities that we have to maintain. So basically, big number, this year, or 2020, we should spend $17.5 million just to maintain what we have right now. That's not doing anything new. So I just wanted to point that out, how much it takes to keep operating. Then I'm going to turn it over. We're going to showcase some of the projects that this committee has funded. One of our most proud of projects is our LED initiative, and I'll let Alicia talk about that.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you. My section's brief. I just want to cover with y'all where we are, what our status is, where our progress lays, the amount of energy for electricity and kilowatt hours that we saved this past fiscal year, a model I created that will show you if we had done nothing, where would we be, and then just sort of highlight a 10-year outlook of where we stand in terms of energy reduction. So time flies. This project started in April 2017 officially and was planned to be a 2-year project. It's taking us a little bit longer. We plan to wrap up this May, so about 3 years. It's been a lot of work, but it's been awesome. And there's a few reasons it's taken a little bit longer. I can go into that if you'd like me to, but I'll skip that for now. But right now we just finished a school, so we're 36 schools complete and 9 to go. So we're right there in the 80% complete, 20% remaining to be completed. Looks like I don't know how to use this either. There we go. So this past fiscal year, this graph shows you in blue, it says current electricity use, but that's last year. Red is our baseline year of fiscal year 14-15. So it shows you by month through those fiscal years the difference in energy consumption in kilowatt hours for electricity. So this just shows you last year we saved a little over 3.4 million kilowatt hours, or 11.6 million BTUs. So it's pretty cool. Our target was 8.5 million kilowatt hours at the end of this project. If you think about it in terms of compared to fiscal year 14-15, we've added a school, which is Enka Intermediate. We've added a pool. When you add the consumption of those buildings to the 14-15 numbers, we're right at 4.5 million. So we're on target of where we need to be. Good. So I wanted to be able to represent the savings that you can't see, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But what this model is attempting to show you is, if worked into that is our actual avoided costs, and then on top of that, compared to our baseline year, we've had a school built, as I just mentioned, and you all know. We've had a pool built, we've had 2 Duke Energy rate increases, which we're saving energy, but we're paying more for the energy we're using. That's something we can't avoid. Something else that's changed since that baseline year is that we're running air conditioning part of the days in our schools, because it's ultimately better for the buildings not to be sitting there unair conditioned for that amount of time, but that costs money. So what I did was took fiscal year 14-15 electricity costs and then added to that all the known and predicted additional costs for all of those items. So those include by month for that whole year, Inca Intermediate's electricity costs, the pool, which didn't open until mid-year last year, its electricity costs, the rate increases, which is an estimate, and then an estimate of how much it costs us to run air conditioning in the summertime in our schools. So what this shows you is that the orange is where we were last year. Blue is where an estimation of where we would be if we had done nothing. So 14-15 represents a year where we weren't implementing these projects, projects aside from the LED project, but mainly the LED project, with all of those additional costs added on top of it. So it's a representation of where we would be if we had done nothing, which means we would be spending somewhere around $890,000 more in electricity last year if we'd done nothing and hadn't implemented these projects. So where we're at today is we're actually saving money. You just can't see it all because some of that savings gets absorbed by factors outside of our control, additional square footage and so on.
So what's the actual for,
Actual savings,
what you're actually spending in 18, 19?
let's see, it is I can get you the exact number, but it's just shy of 3.5 million. Whereas for last year, for fiscal year 14-15, it was close to 4.4.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really,
Yep,
that's almost $1 million.
What's awesome, I think.
yep,
And that happens, and that will then happen every year, right? Like even if you don't make
Exactly.
any other improvements, that $1 million close to it
exactly.
keeps happening
And
every single year.
point being too, we're not done, so we've still got a little ways to go. And being that we were, say, 75% done at the end of this past fiscal year, that's still not a representation of 75% for a full year, because we'd been completing as we went through the year. So it's gonna take some time to see the impact. Once we finish in May, really it's gonna take a year to collect that data to see the true impact. So there's a little bit of a catch-up involved there. And I think I've showed y'all something similar to this in the past, but I'm basically just extending it year after year. But this just shows you our electricity use and decrease over the last 10 years. And the major takeaway is that we have the most buildings that we've ever had. We're using them more than we ever have. Every school uses their facilities after school for sporting events, school during the summertime. So that's just the reality of how our buildings are being used these days. So point being that we're at an all-time high for how much we're using our facilities, how many facilities we have, but historically we're at our lowest for our electricity use. So it's pretty cool. Any questions? No? Great,
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to talk to you this morning. I want to give you a brief update on where we are with our security assessments that you funded for us last year. And if you'll remember, this was a joint venture between the two school systems, Asheville City and Buncombe County. These are just some quick bulletized comments to help me walk through as I talk about this with you. First and foremost, a company named TRC Security Consultants was hired out of Maine. They're on board with us to do 53 schools between the two school districts. We carried with us a request to you with the premise that we are not security experts. We don't know what we don't know. And I will tell you that has very much come true as we've gone through this process. Some of the things that have come up. We also didn't know what we didn't know as far as looking for a firm. And we actually said we need a consultant to help us through this process. A gentleman named Frank Piscotta of Business Protection Specialists Incorporated out of Raleigh, which was fortunate. He didn't have far to travel to us, was retained to help us through this process. Now that says implementation process, but I will tell you, it's both beginning, middle, and end. He's there to help us with the selection of this firm, which he has done. He is there to help us with what I call an in-process review throughout the entire process. And they'll come up on a comment here in the next bullet. I'll explain that a little bit more. And then as we get close to the end, as we look for an implementation going into the next budget year, he will help us there as well. So that was really in our decision how to best use those funds. That became very crucial as to seeking his help, and it has proved to be worthwhile already. I will tell you, TRC coming on board has already done 12 schools for the two systems, 8 Buncombe County and 4 Asheville City. That was important as I was describing this IPR process, in-process review. Small amount of schools done in draft form so we can look at those products. They went ahead and gave us a draft product for each one of the systems at each one of the levels, elementary, middle, and high. And we've had a chance to look at those products and make some suggestions, and they've been very open to it. When we were hiring them, we asked for a draft of their product as far as making the choice. And I will tell you the drafts that we have very much resemble what they said that they would do. So we've done some tweaking with it, and been very satisfied with the tweaks and talked with them. And now we're looking forward, which is the next bullet, that the remaining schools will be done by December. And they'll be in draft form, and then in January we'll get the final product. They are already working on, and just describe the process a little bit to you. They do an interview first with the leadership at the schools. They're talking with the SRO, the principal, the maintenance AP in charge of the schools, the cafeteria worker, the front door receptionist, all the key people that really deal with security aspects of the school on a daily basis. They do a web interview with them about 2 weeks prior to coming out to the school. And like I said, it's about an hour and a half, and it gives them a good picture. So it's not a cold contact when they walk in. They already know what they're basically looking for with that interview process. They've already conducted a few interviews of the next set of schools that'll be done in the month of September. They will be here about 3 times, about 4 or 5 weeks left to go. Probably about 18 schools in the month of September, another set in October, and then a final set in November. And they've given us a backup date in the first part of December, just in case something scheduling wise, a freak weather event or something along those lines, that they can come on and finish the project on time. With that, having that final product in January, that is so critical in that timeline. We were very fortunate to get all these steps in because we'll have budget considerations based on that product. And the 2 that you see listed there, of course, is looking at our capital outlay process, and then what we would come to you ultimately in the fall of next year as far as meeting some of these. We know without a doubt there's going to be a wide range of costs for the different projects. We'll look at our resources and the capital process, and then of course probably come to you with some of the other items in the commission, and then it'll even be years down the road. And then in that process of looking at the priorities of these, we got to look at it from what's some of the simpler things we can do, and then we got to take in consideration the equity amongst our schools and how we do it. So, and I go back to having Mr. Perscotta on board with us. He'll help us through that process. The final thing I would just say is it's been very satisfying with coming together with Asheville City and Buncombe County. I think we've worked very well together, and really enjoying the process so far. I'll entertain a question or two if you have any.
Any question, Mr. Huff? No, sir. Thank you.
So we wanted to showcase a few other projects that were funded by this committee. Avers Creek Elementary Edition, it addressed the security issues there and also the K-3 class size reduction mandated by the state. We actually moved into that area last week, so it is full of students at this moment. Actually, not this moment, but a couple hours ago it was. Community High School, I think a lot of y'all have been out to the community to see this project. It's a wonderful blend of old, the old building with the new structure. We were able to keep the facade and make a really nice space for those children. We also house if you see in this lower photo, it's kind of hard to see, down in this, is this mouse gonna work? Can't see it, okay. Down in this area right here is where the daycare is, that's run by the Southwestern Community College, isn't it? Southwestern Child Care Development. I can get it right here in a minute. But that's part of the county daycare initiative that's housed in this building, which is a nice addition. We also have been working on our stadiums across the county. This is Inca High. This is the 4th stadium to be complete with the new track, new stadium lights, and new turf. You'll see we have 2 more to go, basically North Buckham High and Reynolds High, and that's been a project we've been working on for several years. It's turned out really nice. And then we're also, to deal with security, Black Mountain Primary is one of the schools that's building several structures with a lot of passageway in between the buildings, so we're using the funds provided by this committee to isolate these buildings where it controls traffic in between the separate, there's 4 separate buildings on this campus, so it's you see it's a locked entryway where you can't just freely run between the buildings. So you each have in front of you our prioritized list we've broken it down into priority 1 and priority 2. Hall Creek Elementary is definitely our #1 priority. This is phase 1. This, as Dr. Baldwin said, this building was built when, it was a concept of open learning. It's not very conducive to security. We have begun work, the design work is done on this. It is ready to go. North Buckham High, this is the stadium. This is our 5th out of 6 schools that we will be doing the lighting upfit prior to the track replacement. And Glen Arden is another school just like Hall Creek. It was built during the open concept. The money we're asking for there is to start the process of getting construction documents together so we can bring this committee an accurate price, probably next year. #4, you'll see North Buckham High track replacement. They're again trying to keep up where we've been going over the last few years. #5 is WD Williams. Not only is our LED project save us money, when we do these HVAC upgrades throughout our facilities, it really helps in bringing down our energy costs. We have some equipment out there that's well over its intended age, and it just gets harder and harder to maintain it. Plus the energy cost shows itself. Avers Creek is finishing, or phase 2 of 4 re-roofing. And then you also have a fire alarm replacement in there at Avers Creek. Our fire alarm systems are, they've got about a 20-year lifespan on them, so that's to keep that cycle going. #8 is Fairview Elementary. I don't know if y'all have ever been to Fairview during the parent pickup section, but it's an interesting parent pickup queuing line. It really backs up traffic on US 74, which is dangerous. We've employed, or not employed, the DOT has helped us come up with a plan for that, a schematic plan. So this funding would be to go ahead and to get the design work done, ready to come back to this committee with an actual construction cost. And then Valley Springs, there again, HVAC and energy management upgrades. Candler Elementary is a phase 2 of 3 roofing, and Ingham Middle is phase 5 re-roofing. As you can see, we try to hit our areas as we can. You would think you would do 5 phases of roofing at a school, but that's kind of how we have to do it so we can spread the wealth, hit the worst places first. So our second priority, I'll read through a couple of these. Obviously, Hall Creek is there, the second phase 2 of our Hall Creek work. And then Fairview Elementary, K-3 class size reduction, legislation has forced us into adding spaces for our classrooms due to the number of students in Fairview. It seems like it's either gaining or maintaining students for the last 20-something years. It's kind of crazy. And then I won't read through each one of these, but you can see them in front of you. Have any questions for them? I'll be happy to answer them. I think you had some comments you wanted to make towards the end, Dr. Bone.
Well, I just referenced to Hall Creek Elementary. If you go to that campus, we actually purchased brand new modulars We brought over our intensive intervention. Each of the 6 school districts has an intensive intervention program for our highest need EC students. And so we brought those from Fairview over to Hall Creek. I think, Jay, you would agree that our families, our students, our staff are pleased with those new modulars. But we did that for this purpose, to allow us to move as quickly as possible to bring students out to allow construction to begin. And I think that's a real key. When we talk about phasing, in many cases, it's a timeline. I think the architects and our staffs would agree. We've got 5 projects we'd love to do all in 1 year, start, complete. But it's unrealistic because we can't stop school to allow construction in certain sites to take place. We have very limited, specific time limits in terms of construction taking place on an active campus. So I would reference that with our Hall Creek situation, and again, the impact with Fairview Elementary and the class size. Just clarify that.
And I think, the takeaway from that is we definitely need the funding for phase 1 this year, which would be shown here. And then we've got this phasing wise. Next year we'll be coming back to our next funding cycle for the phase 2 to just keep that process going, so we're not tying up a bunch of money that we can't use, basically.
So are what you saying there, Clark, that phase 1, if phase 1 were funded in this cycle, and phase 2 were funded in the next year's cycle, we would still be right on target to accomplish what we need to do at Hall Creek?
That's correct. We would never stop.
It would be seamless.
It would just keep moving at Hall Creek.
But we were able to do that because of those modulars and being able to move students in and out so that there's a safe area for construction to take place while school's going on.
Okay.
It's just hard, trying to work with students there, it's not as fast as you can work otherwise. But yes, you would not notice the stop in construction if we kept that funding method going.
And one would assume that we were able to fund the high priority requests this year, that Hall Creek that phase 2 would then, assuming, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, it would be top of the next year's high priority.
Absolutely.
To create that seamless connection. Thank you.
Any questions regarding our proposals?
We attached a picture on the end of it that get really bored some nights you can read, but this is kind of looking at a 15-year spending cycle that we didn't read on your handout that we're looking into, we keep track of and readjust on an annual basis.
There was one other question on Hall Creek, and I noticed there were 2 other things under second priority, item 12 and item 19, and that's final phase re-roofing at Hall Creek. And I heard comment made about trying to get this done during the construction, but if that was funded into the next year's cycle, that would work?
Yes.
Because it seemed like it was down the list a bit.
I would be interested in getting a copy of that 15-year schedule, like in a little bit more blown up format, because it's just too small to read.
We have
Just to kind of get a sense for, as you're saying, what's the amount you really just need to have programmed per year for, just regular building maintenance and the kinds of, system upgrades or replacements that you need. So I'd love to get if you could email that just in a little bit bigger format, make it a little bit easier to read, that'd be interesting to just review and understand better. Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions for me?
I'd like to just deal slightly away from the presentation. And I want to preface this on my mind sitting there. And I went over, the first slide actually has quite a bit of information, just basic information about the size of Buncombe County Schools alone. 23,683 projected by DPI. As of last Friday, that was 23,689 students that were inside Buncombe County Schools. At Asheville City Schools, and we're a little bit under 30,000 students, both school systems. That alone, my thought was sitting there how fortunate we are to be able to come to request these type of funds, because we are unique in the entire state of North Carolina. There is no Article 39. There's something similar in Burke County. I don't know if it even exists anymore, but we are unique. But that said, the other part of that slide is we have over 1,300 acres of property in Buncombe County schools alone on our campuses to take care of. So when you put all the needs of Asheville City and Buncombe County, we present it to you, even your best efforts, we're going to fall short into truly covering everything. So I'm going to put a plug out there for a state school capital bond that has been brought up over the past 3 or 4 years, and the needs of that, because you can imagine if we're coming to you with those needs and we have at least some source of relief, 113 school systems have none. And our needs are really, in many cases, much less than what you would find in systems across the state. So I apologize off the soapbox. But I do need to get at least some feedback from this commission over an issue that has come up that I think has future implications for both school systems with projects. It fits in with the timeline. We currently have completed the athletic turf replacements for Inca High School and North Buncombe High School. They are completed. That said, we are finalizing the final contract before it is signed and everyone goes on their way. And we have liquidated damages that were negotiated for both of those projects for a total of $55,000. We have identified needs in the amount of revenue loss of $12,023.29 from Inca High School and $1,781.57 from North Buncombe. And this was due to that project coming in 14 weeks late from the contracted date of completion for Inca and 12 weeks late for North Buncombe. So what happens in the world of school? And this is nothing unusual. We've had these issues, especially with specialized projects where you're bringing contractors from all over the country to come in, and especially, again, the timeline being the summer. So you have a start and you have to be finished because you're going to incur damages to the schools. In this case, for Inca, we had damages of over $3,000 with the baseball field because we had to send the football team to practice somewhere. We lost scrimmage games, and we lost actually a home opener for Inca that had to be played away. Soccer issues similar. Soccer for North Buncombe. So I'm coming to you because this was capital commission funds. These were funds that were part of the total cost of the project that were allotted, but these are damages due to the contractor's inability to bring the project in on time. We have had a precedent set in the past, several years ago, regarding something very similar to this at Irwin High School. What we ended up doing is we asked for accountability from the schools, and we essentially, to the school, provided a check for those liquidated damages with the requirements that it had to be through a process to request capital improvements from that particular area, so that we did have some clear accountability of it. So I'm asking just some clarity from the commission, because again, I do not believe this is going to be the first time this happens. I think every one of these projects that has been brought up today from both systems has that potential of having damages due to a project not being completed. It could mean that we don't have access to classrooms, so where do students go? We may have to bring modulars in. This is something that is, again, in the world of school construction. This occurs on a quite frequent basis. So since it is capital commission funds, I would like to get some type of of clarity from the commission.
Yes, sir. Let me make sure, make sure I've got it clear in my mind as well. The money that was allocated for the projects, that's already been funded, it's already basically designated funds. And the fact the contractor did not complete on time, there was liquidated damages, and that was in the contract, X number of dollars that came back. We're saying 55,000 is where we're gonna settle out at. I think the issue here is not only the actual damages from gate loss, concession loss, all that money that's generated due to the athletic events that pulls back into the athletic programs at both those schools. I think real losers are the students, the student athletes, the band members, lots of those folks. And I feel that it is appropriate that the liquidated damage money is available to the schools in the amounts that you specified, distribute those schools with oversight through Board of Education, however you all choose to do that. That would be my suggestion.
Any of those requests would come through our Board of Education for approval.
Questions?
And Dr. Baldwin, are you proposing that those funds would only be able to be programmed for other capital needs or for other, it could be for any needs at those schools?
I think when they can provide accountability for the loss of revenue. For example, when a home football game is lost, there is certainly a clear estimate we can provide regarding the revenue that's lost, because that game essentially, those revenues go to the visiting team, which now becomes our lost home game. So where we can verify those, I think in fairness that those should be provided as revenue and more flexibility than the actual capital piece.
What if there's a situation where, a project comes in late, which is not good, and I'm sure it's a headache regardless, but there's no actual financial harm that's done that the school could point to? What do you suggest would happen to the funds in that?
I think that's part of what's negotiated. I mean, again, when you're looking at 14 weeks and 12 weeks out, that was actually, if we looked at the per contract, the entire amount of money, we're talking over $100,000. But when it's negotiated, because again, in fairness to the contractor, we have weather, especially in the mountains, weather situations that we should be giving them credit for. There can be unusual circumstances that, again, just fair judgment that we would not hold those damages to the particular contractor.
Okay, I want to make sure I kind of hear you on that point. If there are liquidated damages, though, in the contract that are clearly spelled out, clearly, the criteria's been met, you would always seek to
we would seek
secure those funds,
but
right?
I guess my point is that there are opportunities for that contractor to come back and say, well, we couldn't work that particular week because we had a snowstorm or we had constant rain on a turf field.
Okay. So in some circumstances, you might be a little more forgiving than in others.
That's correct.
I understand.
Any other questions, Dr. Baldwin? I think we've proven this board to have a motion and a vote that we support this to be carried forward to the commission. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Let me just make one comment on this.
Okay.
I mean, it's, we don't have any policy on this, right, Brandon? I mean, we did, and I'm just thinking of the one other circumstance that came up where I think it was kind of a similar kind of issue where we did have some discussion about it and actually adopted a policy, which is in the situations where projects come in either over budget or under budget, right? So if a project comes in under budget, we adopted a policy that those funds would go back into the pool of capital funds and, and be reallocated for future projects. If projects come in over budget, we have a policy that we'd like to ask the schools to look at different ways to fund it. But if there's just a need for more funding, that they can come back to the committee and just ask for more funding, because both these things happen all the time, right? Projects come in over or under. So that's the one place that sounds, I mean, it's different, but it's kind of has some similarities. Like what happens if there's a project and then there's this additional money that happens what's the right thing to do with it? Should it go to the schools? Should it go to the county schools or city schools if it's a city schools project? Or should it just go back into the pool of funding and it, which would then be allocated for future capital? I mean, those all seem like you could probably make arguments for any of those different scenarios in my mind. I guess I don't have like a really strong view on it. I'm just trying to kind of think through what are the different ways that could
I'm
make
not
sense
sure
of this.
that we would want to commingle the funds if they were designated for one activity and that activity ended up, the school got reimbursed. I don't think that we should take that money and try to put it into capital money. That doesn't make sense to me. That's to me, but you understand what I'm saying? I mean, how do you ask them to go back and look at the amount of money, put it in the capital fund, and what would be the origin of it if we had to prove where the money came from?
Well, I guess I would say it's a fair point. It's a fair point. I guess I would just say, the purpose of the liquidated damages provisions in these contracts is not to create extra revenue, right? That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to have a contractual incentive under these capital construction projects for projects to get completed in a timely fashion. That's the purpose. And if there's not, then there is a ding. And so I guess in a way I do see this provision in the contract as kind of related to the capital construction contracts, which we're all about funding. So I don't know, to me I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, I'm saying I think there is a connection there.
Neither am I think be a question about where did that money come from, and then he said, well, that was liquidated damage money, and what pot did it come out of, and where does it end up? Like to me, if it was over and you all benefited from it, you should be able to spend it. You can show that versus tracking 3 different columns and 2 line items to try to balance that amount of money, and it's not enough money to set it was free. So,
if I might just add, I think the uniqueness is the damages were incurred by our students, our staff, and our school community. But I also think it's extremely important, having gone through a lot of these similar issues, that we do symbolically say that once that contract's signed, we are going to hold the date that's in that contract as that is the expectation, because if we don't, I think we set a standard that could
can't
hurt
live
us.
with as much activity as you have. You
So-
couldn't do that.
so,
It would just be very difficult.
So does the damages reduce the overall contract? I mean, the damages they give, does that reduce your overall contract, or is it just basically a sidebar?
It's essentially a sidebar. It's funding that should go back to the contractor that's being withheld, so it's.
Okay, so to Brownie's point, Brandon, I don't know that we don't have a written policy that handles this. I'm thinking that, if we're reasonably supportive of it, that, I mean, you got damages. I mean, to me, it makes sense that the money should go back to the school, but how do we do it? Maintain the integrity of the capital project, and have we need a policy for that. I mean, we don't need to be coming in and voting on whether we do this or that. I think we should have some sort of, policy that's based on, facts presented, and the exact costs, exact damages, and, what do we do with it?
Well, I think that's what Dr. Baldwin's asking us for, right, is to kind of have a policy. What is the policy? So,
I wouldn't know.
Mr. Chair, my one suggestion would be to consider putting this as an action item on the next agenda and allow them to research the issue. I think I see which direction the commission's leaning. I'd like to look into the legalities and see how it works with any policies we have, and I'd just be hesitant to shoot from the hip today. So I would suggest maybe
We could add that to the agenda for next month when we meet to finalize this. And I would just simply add, I think that the 2 schools, North Buncombe and Anca, are the ones who suffered the damages, and they should be made whole. And if we take the costs that Dr. Baldwin alluded to there, that are gate loss and those kind of things, and say, well, we lost this much money. But there are things beyond that also those students at school, and really it's for for those students at each individual school. So I really strongly feel that, you know, whatever the methodology is, the school should be made whole. And it seems like if it goes back into a pot, as Mr. Bell was saying, it disappears, and those two schools suffered from that. And they should be given opportunity to.
So I would agree with that, Max. And I mean, if there's specific kind of tangible financial losses that happen, I mean, I'm all for that. That seems really fair. But just, you know, I mean, one way or the other, all of these funds will be reinvested in schools, right? Whether it's through the Capital Fund Commission or the schools keep the money. I mean, 100% of this money is going to the schools. So it's not going to go anywhere but the schools. It's just a question of what's the structural process for these funds being reallocated. Here's the only concern I have, right? And this is not a near-term concern, but just like in the long term, you know, I wouldn't. You know, I think you need good liquidated damages provisions in your contracts, but if we do create a policy that any time those damages are invoked, it automatically goes to the schools, they can do, you know, and if there's a specific harm, that school would get it, but otherwise the school systems just keep that money, and that's the way I understand the proposal is being put forward. I wouldn't want to create an incentive for putting kind of unreasonable liquidated damages provisions in there, which, you know, would just kind of result in most projects missing it and it being kind of a way that would end up being kind of a funding mechanism. You know, if it ends up being a lot of money, it would just be kind of a funding mechanism for the school. So I wouldn't want to, I just don't want us to incentivize a overly aggressive policy is what I'm saying. And then really that's my only real concern.
I could appreciate that. I would ask Mr. Donald, Scott Donald, to if we put out a bid and had unreasonable liquidated damages, and the contractors bidding on that, would that stifle the number of contractors coming in bidding?
It would do two things. It would probably limit your people that would be interested in the project, or they would just add the cost of the LDs to their price.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Yep.
It's a bump.
Yeah.
So we just need to think about that. And if we do go down this path, Brandon, one thing I would request would be that we track it, just so we can kind of see, like, how is this, you know, if it's tens of thousands of dollars a year, you know, that's one thing. But if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that ends up then I think that might be different, and we might need to check in on it again.
I think the thing that makes athletic programs different is their self-funding.
Yeah.
You know, they use their gate money to buy uniforms, to buy other athletic equipment and band equipment. So I think that's a little different than if we were open up a classroom. You know, it's really the whole system that hurts. It's not really the
But we're dealing with credibility, and that's what we need to focus on. It's assuming that the people who are implementing those are credible, and they're gonna do it right. I know that's not a guarantee, but we've gotta have something to trust people to do it right.
So this is, you know, this is different. This is athletic revenue. So this is different than just not hitting the goal, right?
That's correct.
Because if the intermediate school wasn't done in time, that's different than you know, football stadium not being done in time.
There certainly are differences, although it could apply as well to having to make some adjustment for students to open a school year. So that could apply potentially, but athletics is a different animal, absolutely.
Okay, we're not going to decide this today.
All right. No, sir. I think your recommendation, Brandon, is excellent, and we will not have a vote or anything today, but you bring back information and we'll handle it at our next meeting. Okay.
Our pleasure.
So I believe we're down to the end of our agenda. Any other questions for the folks from Buncombe County? Hearing none, our next meeting, refresh my memory on that, Matt.
It's the third week of October?
Is it the third?
Third Monday of October, I believe.
That's what I have down.
Okay, all right. The date is?
October 21.
October 21 is when we will reconvene, and at that point, we will make the decision on the awards. and also hear information back about the money regarding the athletic program there at the end of North Buffalo. All right, any other information anyone wants to bring up for value of the commission? Hearing none, move for adjournment. So moved. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.